I'm going to ask you the first question as you sort of get ready to look at your notes, and maybe you don't even need to. But the first question I'm going to ask you, what was the motivation behind your connecting the institute directors, which, as you can see, the average age here is, all of us is maybe 30s and 40s, maybe a little bit older, to the young people that study at USIU, and what was your motivation to connecting this kind of two institutes together? Because USIU is full of young people who are obviously going to be, as we're told many times, tomorrow's leaders, and the whole idea of governance and directorship and leadership. What was the motivation in sort of setting up this partnership?
Well, thank you very much for that. I think perhaps I need to start by saying that I've been a director for the last 12 years. And when I was certified, I remember the first meeting I attended, I was just around the old folks. It felt so lonely at that time. And one of the questions I kept asking is, why don't we have young people to be part and parcel of this directorship? What we have seen oftentimes is we're talking about a gig economy where a lot of people who are involved are actually the young people. You know, they are hustling, they're having short-term contracts in various engagements, and so they're running their own businesses. And it was therefore important that they cannot just be consumers of good governance. They must be participants in good governance. And so that thought, and of course with USIU, a university that has recognized that it is important to cultivate good governance from a young age in order to bring everyone into that. And as we started that discussion, I think the university also recognized that it's not just about young people, there are also a number of other people who need to be trained further. And I know IOD is now involved with the Center for Professional Education, again a center building capacity of directors. And I think the statistics we had, the average age is 19 years, right? 80% of Kenyans are actually below the age of 35. So that's a huge youth bunch. And by the way, that phenomenon is not just in Kenya. It's cutting across the continent. We have a lot of young people. How are we going to create an enabling environment where we can see good governance if we don't involve these young people? If we don't put them in a position where they can help in making the right decision, in creating the right culture. And so that was the motivation to be able to connect with the university, but also across the programs that we do. So you have mentioned I'm running a non-governmental organization. I'm actually the Africa director. We work in 6 countries. Part of our work is really sustainable agriculture, but we're also keen on gender and social inclusion. But within what we are doing, youth is our main target because we recognize we cannot succeed if we leave the youth behind. The youth must be part and parcel of that which we are doing. And in all the countries we work in Africa, the programs are being led by young people. And so I think we cannot have boards that are only composed of old folks, you know. And there's nothing wrong with that. We still need the old folks, but we need the old folks to be working with the young people. You know, there are gurus in management who have said that when you are growing, success may be just about yourself. But when you become a leader, success must be about growing others. So the issue of leadership, mentorship, the issue of coaching is so critical. In all my classes, when I ask students if they would compromise to be able, say, to get a passport, because a lot of my students are multinational, all of them 100% will say yes. Why are they saying yes? Because they see it happening. Who is doing it? All of us. We must change that. It's a cultural issue that we must look into.
As you work with young people at university and probably on other personal engagements, what challenges do you see that stop? You mentioned that a lot of boards and a lot of leadership positions in these sort of organizations are older people. What are the challenges you see that stops or hinders or probably doesn't encourage younger people to seek board positions, to seek directorship, to seek leadership positions in business, in government, in corporations, and even at your own organization? What are the challenges that young people face as they try and get into this kind of opportunities?
I think one interesting thing, and many of you will probably agree with me, that it is easier to say, let's promote, let's build the young people. We can preach about that. But making decisions, the right decisions to be able to accommodate that, is often very difficult. So there are organizations that will say, oh, we want to build leadership, but if you find young people applying to be in those organizations, they do not get opportunities. And it's not just even in the government, you know. One of the things that I was mentioning earlier to the chair, because by the way, part of bringing the USIU was what the chair tasked me to do through the CEO. And one of the things you will see that a lot of young people are working not just in the gig economy, but also in the social space. Others are doing social work. They're in the NGO sector, for instance. And I think we have brought in probably just a single institutional member for the NGO, which actually brought in. We need to be able to open those spaces for the young people to come. We talk about it, but we don't make decisions to support that which we are saying. So one of the biggest obstacles is ourselves who are making decisions. Can we accommodate the young people? We talk about mentorship. It's about encouraging. Can you pick someone who is young and walk with them? So one of the things is the mentorship. Again, is just on paper, but we are not practically doing it. It's a big problem. There are people who will also say they are not skilled enough, they are not competent enough. You know, they are not experienced. Where do you expect them to get experience if you're not giving that opportunity? The experience, you have to open doors. We don't have internship programs, internship that can actually be able to help build those skills. I have asked IOD, why don't we have a student category for directors, you know, because if they graduate, for instance, from USIU, having done leadership and governance, why can't they be accommodated as student directors so that they can have an opportunity to work with others? So those are really issues. And you know, trainings cost. So if we don't budget them in our plans, we cannot be able to implement them. So there are issues around not having deliberate plans to be able to do it, or putting in budget, people just not willing to work. Maybe they also go threatened. If you bring too many people, too many young people, they're going to take away your job, you know. But as a leader, if you're not growing others, you're not very helpful. You know, we can complain, we can criticize, you know, but you know what, that's what Dale Carnegie said. Only fools do that. They complain. In fact, they do that all the time. They criticize. But we must be those who are enabling the young people to be able to feed, to be able to train, to build their capacity. We must find all these spaces. In fact, in boards, earlier we were talking about digitization, ChatGPT. Who is going to do that? Most of the older folks do not know how those things work. It is those young people that you need to be able to provide that knowledge, that skills. You know, if you look at it as a risk for the organization, you need someone to be able to help you. Why don't we elevate these people to be also decision-making table?
You've mentioned mentorships and so on and so forth. If we were to start as IOD tomorrow, we come out of this summit and go back to IOD and we're sitting in a board meeting, what sort of practical things can we start doing tomorrow to get younger people involved with the institute, and how do we practically, because it's easy to mention words like mentorship and coaching, which is a new buzzword in business and in organizations, but how do we, what are the practical things we can take as an institute to start getting these young people from USIU, from other colleges and from other places to start getting involved in the whole business of directorship and leadership and so on?
IOD has started very well. So I think the partnership with the USIU, and I'm sure you're keen on other institutions, is very, very important. IOD can also work to be able to ensure that there are courses that are tailor-made to build capacities of not just the students, but also of the professors who are providing and offering those courses. Most of the universities I know have mentorship programs, you know, and I dare say that sometimes you also need to think not just from the university level, but even a much lower level. because behaviors begin to be cultivated at a much lower level. How do you begin to think about that? You don't think about trying to rectify a mistake. You try to cultivate it when we still have time. So there is an issue of looking at a much younger generation. How do you reach out to it? How do you have directors who are younger? If you can certify more directors who are younger, who are working with the younger people there, and they can be able to help reach out to the young people, I think that would be fantastic. I know also that a lot of institutions, a lot of organizations, a lot of in the Juakali sector, there are mentorship programs. Some of them are formal, some of them are informal. And I think those are areas where IOD can also get involved. So young people want you to set, by example, talk about the issues that affect them so that they feel much more involved, they feel that you're actually supporting their cause. I think there are a lot of opportunities. So hopefully from here, your board is going to be very busy to discuss how do you get some of these things on.
You mentioned NGOs and so on, and we know that you run an NGO called the Ripple Effect, which mostly works with farmers and so on. My question at the moment, would you sort of just, I know you practice what you preach, so I'm sure in your other capacities you work with young people, you work with farmers who may be formal, maybe informal. What sort of things do you do, or would you be doing with young people to bring them in the formal sector and the informal sector, to bring them into this whole idea of cultivating a culture of leadership and good governance? And even in the private sector, you mentioned Juakali, and even in the Juakali, I'm sure a lot of people that you work with, they could be young farmers and so on and so forth. What practical things are you currently doing to get these young guys to think about and start practicing, good governance, ethical leadership, and so on and so forth?
Starting with, and as I said, we work in 6 different countries. We work in Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, Ethiopia, and Zambia. And in all the countries that we work, most of those who are leading our programs are very young people, below 40 years of age. Now that is intentional. Because part of the target group that we're looking at is the youth. And we feel that the leaders should be at that age that they can identify with the problems that we are trying to resolve. So we are intentionally going for younger leaders to be able to take part in decision making within the organization. Now that is not to say we are getting rid of the old people. We still have people who have experience. But what we've done is to put them in a position where they're mentoring others. They're working with them, they're challenging their decisions. And it is what sort of Dr. Nelson was saying, being able to challenge, being able to look at a progressive kind of bonds that are able to challenge, ask the right questions so that these young people are also growing. And we are also doing that amongst the staffing. We ensure that the staff that we bring on board, we want to see 80% as young people across all the countries that we are working. So we are intentionally, it's almost like positive discrimination. But we want to ensure, if you have a population of 80% are the youth, should you not be thinking about 80% of your staff being the youth? That's exactly what we are doing. So there's a bit of that we are doing. In our programs, we have talked about gender and social inclusion. And remember, by the way, if you look at the statistics, even in this country, there are about 80% being the youth, but 67% of those youth are actually unemployed. And this is why that is important. And the statistics is more or less the same across the region. So what we are doing is also ensuring that no one is being left behind. Okay? So when we talk about gender and social inclusion, we recognize that it's not, when you talk about the youth, you're talking about ladies, you're talking about men as well. So that the balance, if you look at the population of this country, 50.4% are ladies. So the balance is also something that we get right. We want people who are marginalized to be also be involved, to be also targeted. And away from that, we have courses for the leadership, targeting leadership and governance. And there are a few that we have planned with IOD, there are some that we've done previously, again, just to be able to build that awareness around making the right decisions. So it is critical. We have very practical things we are doing. And the other key thing is actually on succession management. Again, something we talk about, but we don't do, you know. When you think about your position now, wherever you are, who is going to take over when you are not there? We challenge the leaders within the organization. If you are hit by a bus, who takes over? You know, have you planned to ensure that if you are not there, someone can do that which you're doing without any interruptions within the organization? So succession management is a critical part of what we are doing. But the other thing is also recognizing that when we think about technology, when we think about digitization, we think about machine learning, and we have integrated that in the way we work, we are bringing those who understand it best, and those are the younger generation.
We just talking about a demographic dividend being based on physical age, you know. But I'm sure there's other ways of taking advantage of other kinds of ages, like people who think young even though they are old physically. There could be people who, I'm sure there are people who are very technologically savvy, even at 70, 80 years old, who are very, very good with computers, very, very good with the new emerging technologies and so on and so forth. Do you think there's an opportunity to, because the reason why we look for younger people is because they are very quick to learn, they've got a grasp of all these new emerging trends and emerging technologies and all this emerging stuff. Do you think there's an opportunity as well for even organizations like IOD to be able to, you spoke about retooling and reskilling older people so that we don't lose the experience they bring, we don't lose the wisdom they bring, but giving them new tools to navigate sort of and lead through these new emerging technologies and new emerging ways of doing things?
Yes, I think that is why we are very keen on both mentorship and succession planning. Because we recognize that a number of people who have been there are very much experienced. They have a lot of knowledge, but we must plan on how they can be able to hand over some of those to the younger people. So it's not about getting those who are a bit old out. It's about how do we ensure that by the time they are leaving, they are totally empty in their brains. They have handed over that knowledge. Would it not be nice to leave knowing that all that you know, someone can carry it up, you know, someone can use it, you know, and be able to support them. And I think Dr. Nelson has a question. Do you want to ask him to, so that we can answer the question? But it is important that, we deal with this. Dr. Nelson, ask the question.
Yeah. That question that was asked by Albus about reskilling and retooling older and more experienced people is something that I have personally been doing. When I'm mentoring or coaching, I have realized that there is also reverse coaching and mentoring. The young people that I deal with, they are very technologically savvy. And they have also challenged me to become technologically savvy. I want to learn about ChatGPT. The other day I was doing it with my son because I asked him, can he help me to do my profile for an organization that wanted me to hold an international board position. But they had asked me to do a profile. And nowadays, as I'm growing older, I'm getting lazier and lazier. So my son told me, let's pick what you had done earlier and mix it with a few things, and we ask this question. And the profile came in a manner that I would never have imagined. And so you have also to agree and to humble yourself to know that learning is continuous, even as we are old and even in the boardroom. Right now, you cannot talk about technology. I talk about digitization. Many of us did not even conceptualize what it was. We used to think digitization is technology, but technology is thinking business. You know, it's how you do. Digitization is how you remodel your businesses, to fit in and align them with the existing, environment. So what I have seen is that as an older board member, as an older person, I also need reverse coaching and reverse mentoring. But you know, it takes, a lot of courage to humble yourself. When you are so experienced and, being a CEO, being a chairman, if you take the chairmanship and the CEOship to learning, then you will never learn. So it's one very important thing that I have noted that we also need to be coached through reverse coaching and reverse mentoring.
I'm just going to ask Dr. Fred, you work a lot with young people and you've got a bunch of professors here who also work with young people. When you look at the crystal ball, in 10 years' time, what do you see what the board and the membership of the Institute of Directors sort of looking like in the context of being able to open up these sort of spaces to younger people to get into leadership and directorship and board membership and so on and so forth?
One of the things that is interesting is, at this point, whenever we talk about boards, I think much of the focus is on the fiduciary function, having the right legislation, the rules and all that. But the two areas we leave out, one is the strategic function, which is how do we mobilize people to be able to solve problems that affect us on a day-to-day basis, which is important, so that when you're bringing people into the board, they are people that recognize we're in a VUCA environment. But away from that, I think one area that we haven't looked at is the generative function. That if you are in a board, you must be in a position where it's not just fiduciary and strategic, but how can boards be able to keep themselves abreast of what is happening on a day-to-day, the technologies, the machine learning. So we just tried to talk about ChatGPT. In fact, later, if you allow me, I will probably ask maybe Professor Koshal to talk about what are the challenges even within universities where, and the young people are watching us. So if someone can go, as we had the example, you go to ChatGPT and ask for a menu, that is the same thing they are doing when you give assignments. They will go, you're saying, how do you deal with corporate social responsibility? And they will ask ChatGPT, as a lecturer, how do you know this is their own original knowledge? If they have seen we are in a microwave generation where we are looking for shortcuts and they are watching us, that is what they do, is a challenge within the university. We mark assignments that you're wondering, is this the student or is it something else? So we must think about the generative function within boards, that we bring in people who understand some of these things as risks, not just as opportunity, because they are opportunities, but they are also risks. How do we deal with that? So that the boards of the future will be the boards that are thinking on their feet. Okay? They can predict what is, they can actually create, not predict. When you can predict, you are beginning to do analysis and all that. But if you can create it, I think that's what Richard Branson said. Why do you have to worry with predicting if you can create? So it's thinking about what future do you want for your organization? What future do you want to create? And do you have the right people that can help you to create that environment that is useful? Prof. Koshal, are you happy to look at what are those challenges that you are getting with the students, the younger generation, and how best do we deal with that? Because these are the people who are going to be leading this country. They are the people who are going to be in boards. How do we prepare for that?
Thank you very much, Fred. I think you have articulated the issues very well. I know we all work with young people. And how many of you find them very loyal?
Not these days.
Not these days. So let's start there. In fact, research is being done to find out why young people actually don't. You find they move from one job to the other. Maybe they change jobs 3 times in a year. What is the problem? And there are a lot of research that is still being churned out to find out what exactly is happening. And I think one of the things that you'll find with young people is that, not that we were not taught critical thinking, we were, but maybe we were not taking it literally. They actually literally take it. Critical thinking. I also have my view, I have my way of looking at it, and yet some of us are still from the old school that you do as I say. Sometimes not even as I do. And so there are a lot of challenges that we have with young people, and I think I'm very happy to see this discussion taking off. I hope it will continue to get even more robust based on research, because those are the issues that we actually find, even in class. It is not the way we were taught. I go to class and basically try to facilitate, because with all the technology, I'm a professor, yes, but they actually they know more technology than I do. And so, and also now in class they have laptops, they have phones, they have everything. So even before you talk about a concept, or the moment you put it on a PowerPoint slide, they already have the answer to probably what you are going to ask. So I think we need to know that these fellows are ahead of us, by all means. And even in the marketplace, that is something that needs to happen, so that you actually consult them, you find out what their needs are, because that's why they move from one job to the other. Basically because if we don't give them space, if we tell them to do routine things or routine jobs, and yet these are fellows that have a lot of information, then it will be a problem.
Coming to ChatGPT, when it happened, it just happened maybe in the last few months. I think in December it was when really it took off. And it took us in the academia by surprise, because you see now, one of the big components in learning is having students do research. Now with ChatGPT, they just basically produce that thing in a minute. Research literally that would have taken them maybe 3 weeks to do. But of course now, there are also tools and softwares that will help cut that. And I think that's helping a little bit. Dr. Nelson had said, he produced something, but he tweaked a little bit, or that's what ought to happen. Because initially before, they would just produce, they were lazy, and they just submit it as it is. But now with the softwares, we're able to catch that, so that at least you are able to have an input from them. I think we generally cannot just say, because technology is there, literally I'm not going to think about it, I'm not going to tweak it, I'm not going to do any of that. And so, yes, it's helping, but it has challenges, and those are the challenges that we are dealing with, because we still require them to give their input.
Thank you. Thank you, Prof. And I think what you're saying is very critical, that it's recognizing that some of these young people will be much more knowledgeable than us.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fred. We're very grateful for you to share sharing your experience and your insights with the directors here. And we'll let you sit down now so you can go into the next session, but thank you very much. Thank you very much, guys, Dr. Fred.